again. Welcome back. 7:42.
Yeah, joining us now to go through some of the day's headlines is the journalist and author Susan Holder and the political editor of the HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Welcome back to both of you. Kev, this is one that will get your juices flowing. Rupert Murdoch allegedly told Sunak not to quit, and asked the big question earlier, who's actually running the country?
Well, I mean, it's a great story. So this has come from Ben Riley-Smith, who's a political editor of The Telegraph. He's written a new book on the Conservatives' 13 years in power, and he has discovered that if you cast your mind back to when Rishi Sunak was fined for breaking lockdown rules, apparently he drafted a resignation letter, he was ready to go. Word got back to Rupert Murdoch that this was going to happen, and he let it be known that he did not want Rishi Sunak, who was Chancellor at the time, to resign, so he didn't. What? Now, it doesn't explain why Rupert Murdoch was so against the idea. I can only imagine it's because he had given up on Boris Johnson by this point and probably thought that Sunak would be a good replacement. And if he was to resign then, it was his choice. Yeah, don't worry about what the voters think. But
they always used to say, didn't they, whenever there was a new Prime Minister in Downing Street, the first person to be invited into number 10 for coffee or whatever was Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that he has had an inordinate amount of influence, not just with Conservative Prime Ministers, but also with Tony Blair, obviously. I mean, Gordon Brown as well was very aware that you had to try and keep Rupert Murdoch on side and the Sun on side if you could.
So are they saying in this that Murdoch sent his people round to number 10 or number 11?
I think word was passed on. Now, what they say is that it was the intermediaries here were friends of Sunak who have connections to News UK. Now, they point out that William Hague is a columnist for The Times. Rishi Sunak was his protégé. He was his successor as the MP for Richmond. Daniel Finkelstein, who is a Conservative peer, is also writes for The Times. So they're saying maybe those were the sort of intermediaries. And as I say, word was passed back from New York, where Rupert Murdoch was to say,
and apparently Rishi Sunak had actually written the letter.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at the time it was briefed by his people that he was seriously considering resigning, but it was decided by his advisers that actually that's probably going to scupper your chances of becoming Prime Minister.
Before we go to Sue's, Kev, back in the day, you know, Murdoch was always considered the kingmaker. You know, he chose the next Prime Minister. Do you think that's still relevant in the days of the internet, where we get our news from a much more diverse range of sources? It's the Sun what won it.
Yeah.
Does that still work?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what the Sun sells these days, but it's obviously much less than it did the newspaper anyway. I think it was always overplayed. The Sun obviously liked to say it was the Sun what won it. I think there was no doubt it was influential, and they always made sure that they backed the winner. I think it was slightly overplayed.
Huge news when they decided to back Tony Blair.
Well, absolutely, and also when they dumped Gordon Brown. They dumped Gordon Brown during the Labour Party conference to back David Cameron, which caused a huge furore at the time. It'll be very interesting to see who they back, actually. If it looks like Labour are definitely going to win the next election, will they back Labour next time?
Will they?
Who knows?
I mean, I think it is being sold as a story as that Murdoch is the Logan Roy from Succession figure, which makes it all kind of sound a bit more kind of interesting and sexy. But actually, I mean, I'm sure also Rishi Sunak was having lots of conversation with lots of people, and I'm hoping our Prime Minister is able to make up his own mind. But he may well cast a range of opinions. And, yes, and that could just be one in the mix, couldn't it? So I think that, you know, to overplay it and say it's all down to that, we will not know anyway.
Can I show you something that I haven't seen yet, but you say is really, really cute? Because today is Rosh Hashanah, and the royal family have released a video on Twitter of the King, Charles, dancing with local members of the Jewish community. Apparently this is really worth watching.
As he shook his hands at the end there.
I think it's absolutely adorable.
Yeah.
And I think Charles comes over genuinely as a really great guy, actually, when he does things like that. And we were talking about this. We had a little look at it before, didn't we? We were kind of talking about how lucky we are, I think, that we have got Charles when we think about what we could have gone. And actually, when you look down the kind of lines of where things could have gone, is there something in the fact that the number twos in the kind of order of how they're born? So we could have had Margaret, but we got Elizabeth. We could have had Andrew, but we got Charles. We could be getting William,
Harry,
but we could have had Harry.
Yeah.
And is it to do with the fact that weight of the responsibility that's put on them makes them rise to an occasion, or is it that fact that if you're second in line that actually you go a bit crazy, or is it a combination of a bit of both? I think Charles is a good guy, and I think he comes over as a good guy. In that.
Yes.
Yeah, it definitely is. I can see why they've put that out, because it makes it look like he's game for a laugh,
He is.
sense of humour, getting stuck in, and it's really sweet, isn't it?
Yeah.
These old people,
Yeah.
you know, as you say, dad dancing. You know, it's money. He can laugh
There's
at
nothing
himself
wrong with dad
as well,
dancing.
because it's not polished. It's not a massive sort of PR thing. It makes him look slightly awkward.
Yeah,
but
it's a human
Yes,
touch.
but that's okay.
It is okay.
It's
Totally okay.
touchy-feely.
Well, it's relatable, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
that's every sort of, half
He looks
cut
like
granddad at a wedding, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and he doesn't look like he's doing it grudgingly in any way.
Yeah.
He looks like that's what I'm here for, and I'm going to do it.
By the way, if you're listening on the radio,
You missed the fun.
you missed it. But it was the King, Charles, just sort of, as we say, dad dancing.
Yeah.
With members of the local Jewish community, and they're all having a whale of a time.
They were.
But it's very dad dancey. That's
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
But it's lovely that he's prepared to release that and have a laugh at himself.
Yeah, and he makes me look like Michael
Really nice.
Flatley. Susan, on to a more serious topic,
Yes.
of course, the arrest of Daniel Khalif. And a news story coming out here about the state of the prison at the time. People were absent from work.
Well, not just people. According to the Daily Mirror, and I'm absolutely gobsmacked, 80 members of staff didn't turn up on the day that he escaped from Wandsworth Prison. So, the Tory minister has said that the staffing levels were still above the minimum required, which kind of boggles the brain a bit. Well, what are the minimal levels? But, so of 125 Band 3 prison officers attended their shift, but obviously 39% of the frontline staff did not turn up. They're not booked holiday. It doesn't say... It's not like it's scheduled in that this is just what the staffing levels were. Didn't turn up. And I just think this speaks to this incredible culture we have at the moment of no-shows. How many times do you go for a train and actually your train's delayed because the driver hasn't turned up? The airports were in chaos last week because air traffic control staff didn't turn up. These aren't people on strike. These aren't people who have scheduled or booked a day off for whatever they need to do or for holiday. Or how many people are on the phone doing that? I can't come in today. I don't feel very...
Yeah.
It must be just like an epidemic of that.
And it makes you wonder, Kev, the next question, obviously, is going to be, did this have an impact? Did this understaffing mean that he could make his escape much easier?
Well, it can't have helped, you would imagine, and it's remarkable that maybe only one person has escaped. Maybe if they realised how short-staffed the prison was, then more of them would be trying to go over the wall.
And I think what people have to think about as well is if the prison continues to run, or if they cover those absences, what you're doing is you're talking yourself very, very kind of smartly out of your job.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if people go, actually, why are we paying all these people if we can function on? I mean, I don't think things are functioning very well. But if they find a way around that, all you're doing by calling in sick all the time is actually telling people that you're not necessary to your position.
Yeah.
So I'd think very carefully if you're one of those people.
Astonishing. Kev, this is another juicy story politically that you're gonna love. This is a perpetual one that does the rounds, and it's back again. Labour planning to slash the voting age to 16 if they win.
Yeah, so this is Labour bigwigs met a few weeks ago to decide on their policies for the next election, and this was one of them, that if Labour win the election, they will reduce the voting age from 18 down to 16. I mean, they've done this in Scotland.
Yeah.
The SNP did it. They did it for the Scottish referendum. Now, the only reason that parties do this is because they think it will give them an electoral advantage. Now, obviously, it didn't quite work out in terms of the Scottish independence referendum. But, I mean, the 16, 17-year-olds, is there a huge clamour among them for the vote?
Well, the thinking behind it is the Labour Party think younger people are more likely to vote for them. So
in general, that is probably true.
On the one hand, it's a bit of a direct electoral play for votes, but then again, the turnout amongst young people is very low, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess they're probably reasoning at the moment the turnout is well, zero, because they can't vote. So any ones that do turn up, the majority of them, they reckon, will vote Labour. So it's all to the good as far as Labour are concerned. But it is, I think, pretty cynical. Although I have to say, I've had to laugh at Greg Hands, the Conservative Party chairman, saying that Labour only want to do this for their own political advantage. Well, voter ID was brought in, and Jacob Rees-Mogg even admitted it. That was brought in to try and give the Conservatives an electoral advantage. So I think they're both as bad as each other. Really.
Do you think, Susan, that 16-year-olds are mindful enough of the detail of things like Brexit, immigration policies to vote? Or is 18 the right age, do you think?
I think 18 probably is the right age. I don't think there is actually... I mean, I've worked with young people for years. I had taught at a youth theatre, ran a youth theatre for 11 to 18-year-olds. I think they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. I think they also are very honest. You know where you are with people of that age. They kind of tell it like it is, which I love. But I'm not sure that they do. But I think they would be very kind of key on some issues. I think they, you know, education and everything, they'd have much more of a handle on than most of us do. But I don't think there's necessarily a clamour for that. And I do think, as well, if you gave it to them, how many of them would actually bother to go and do that would be the question I would have.
Yeah.
OK, well, if they want to go to the theatre, they won't be able to afford it, according to The Guardian.
Well, yes, it's interesting that's how you put it. That is how The Guardian kind of are selling the top of the story. But if you read further down, it's not all bad news. So they've gone on the line that Sarah Jessica Parker of Sex and the City fame is coming to the West End with her real-life husband, Matthew Broderick, and they're doing the Neil Simon play Plaza Suite, which is a great play. And the top ticket for that, which is kind of... they're featured in yellow at the top of the page, £395 it's shouting, which is obviously an extortionate amount of money to go to the theatre. But when you read further down, that actually does include champagne, access to the lounge, a dessert board, ice cream and a programme. But it's still expensive. But if you read, but if you read further down, some tickets can be bought for as little as £25 and a limited number for £40. I would say I've been to the theatre a lot recently. I've seen lots of great shows in the West End. I've seen Moulin Rouge, Crazy for You, Guys and Dolls. I would heartily recommend all of them. I did not pay anything like that. You shop around, there's always a way.
OK, Susan, we have to leave it there. And Kev, thanks. We'll see you in the next hour. First, let's take a look at the weather with Aidan.